anticipation principle, it is possible also for the flexibility principle to identify some drivers that allow to reduce the cost of change: agile process, redundancy, overskilling, and modular architectures. The first driver is agile process. In order to make a project flexible, we need to work on the sequence of the activities and on the relations between them. If in the stage gate approach we assume that we are doing the right activities in the right way, which means that going back is somehow wrong, this is not true in a flexible approach. In this approach, we accept that the uncertainty pushes us to rethink and redo activities that we have already done, which becomes an opportunity rather than an issue. In order to work in this perspective, we need to rapidly test any possible solution and understand the quality of what we've done and the chance to integrate it with the work done in other activities or parts of the project. Therefore, activities need to be overlapped rather than sequenced over time. The case of Netscape, previously mentioned, is a good example of this driver. The second driver is the use of the redundancies. If the stage gate is based on the ability to anticipate any kind of challenges in order to take the best decision first, working in a flexible environment will completely avoid this kind of thinking. We need to explore various alternatives to be ready to face the constraints and challenges that the external environment would give us. We are redundant, meaning that we need to do more than the minimum amount of work necessary to reach the end of the project, knowing that this additional work will enable us to find the best way to reach the final result. A good example here is related to the typical approach in the design process in creative industries, where before taking a clear decision, various alternatives, which may be stories, designs, shapes, or styles, are explored and often mixed to reach the final one. The third driver is to work on the project resources to introduce flexibility in the process. In particular, the chance to select people with a high competence level is a key factor to be able to work in an agile, flexible way. We usually refer to this concept as overskilling. The chance to have people who are able to find solutions while working, to collaborate together, merging and benefiting from different perspectives are extremely valuable in a situation where there is not a clear structure of the work to be done, as it happens in the stage gate. The project team works proactively during the project to solve any challenge that arises while monitoring the opportunities emerging from the market and from the technological side. An example here may be the creation of a website where you decide to work with a computer science engineer rather than a web designer. In the case in which the project would evolve towards the integration with a mobile app or with other information systems, the team could quickly react rather than having to search for new resources that do not know the project. The fourth and final driver is the modular architecture. This way of introducing flexibility within a project focuses on working on the output to make it easier to manage changes during the execution. The architecture of a product or of a service is given by the sum of all its parts, which are called components, and the logics that link them. To move from the idea of the architecture to the idea of modular architecture, we need to focus on the functionalities of the final product and on the role of each component. Given the list of all the components and the list of the functions, if the same component is linked with multiple functions, we call it an integrated architecture. If otherwise, each component is linked with a clear function, we call it modular architecture, and the component is then defined as a module. A modular architecture has various benefits. Think about a computer, a typical example of a product with a modular architecture. The architecture is given by the motherboard upon which many other boards can work, such as the video card or the audio card. With this kind of structure, even in late development stages, there is the chance to work on a single card without touching the others. In other words, having distinct modules reduces the time and cost necessary to implement changes, while enabling the chance to work in parallel on various modules. Still, the costs necessary to set up the architecture in this way are not negligible. These four drivers enable a flexible project management. All of them has a common logic. The project cost is higher, more competencies, more cycles, more architecture design, to reduce the expected cost of changes. Therefore, it is meaningful to invest in the flexibility only in those cases where the chance to introduce changes in the late development phases are high. In other words, in terms of decision-making, flexibility is a gamble on the future. All the drivers for flexibility are costs that must be decided at the beginning of the project and will only bring value if it will be actually required to introduce changes later on along the project. Otherwise, they will be useless costs. So, although the principle of anticipation acts on the curve of uncertainty at the beginning of the project, and the principle of flexibility acts on the curve of cost of change at the end of the project, the two principles are two sides of the same coin. In fact, at the beginning of the project, we have to understand to what extent our environment is turbulent. If it is, then we will invest from the beginning on certain costs to create the option to introduce low-impact changes at the end of the project. In other words, flexibility is similar to the theft insurance for your car. It is a certain cost that will make sense only if someone steals your car. Otherwise, it will only harm the project budget.